Hey folks, Meandering Mike here. I just finished a playthrough of this old SPI game, Jena-Auerstadt, set in October of 1806. This was first produced in the Napoleon At War Quad, in a flat tray, I think maybe in a box, and then the separate folio editions. I'm going to turn that playthrough into a combination here. I'm going to do a quick how to play for this system, and then I'm going to do a little after action review. So there'll probably be 3 total videos, get it all spliced together and separated apart and all that stuff. So let's dig in to the how to play for Jena-Auerstadt, the Battle of Prussia, 14 October 1806. All right, so first of all, that's underneath here. This was a series game, because I mentioned it was based on the Napoleon At War Quad. So they would have a standard set of rules, and then they would have 4 games. Each would have their exclusive rules. So I'm going to quickly review the standard rules. Many of you, if you're watching that, you're probably familiar with old SPI Hexagon Counter war games, and I'll just sort of cover that in quick terms. This is not, this is an easy game for a beginner to pick up. This is a particularly odd situation in that there's a split map and there's some weird decisions. I wouldn't recommend this as the first game in the Napoleon At War Quad. If you've not played a war game before, I would go for either Wagram, not the Battle, because that doesn't include artillery in the Battle of Nations. They didn't have enough pieces in the counter mix. Marengo might not be too bad, but probably Wagram. So let me go quick through the thing. So it's a as I mentioned, Hexagon counter war game. Each counter there's a stacking of 1. You can only have 1 unit per hex. There's infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Infantry and cavalry can only fight when they're adjacent. Artillery can fight adjacent, or they can bombard 1 hex away. Now, this game has what you would call sticky zones of control. When you enter a zone of control, you must stop. You may not move any further. In fact, if you start in a zone of control, you may not leave. The only way you can leave a zone of control is if, from the result of combat, either you retreat them away from you, or you end up retreating away from them, or possibly elimination. If they get eliminated, then you're free to move on later. So, sticky zones of control. You must attack in your turn. If you are next to an enemy, you must attack all enemies that you are next to. So if you're engaged on a wide front, then you have to make decisions on which guy's going to attack where. It is possible to have a single unit attack more than 1 unit, or you might want to get good odds here and have one guy, what they call soak off, or do a diversionary attack. But those can be, low odds attacks where you could actually put yourself at risk. I'll show you the combat results table in a minute. Now, one thing about this game is the combat results table is what they call relatively bloodless. The fact that at 1-to-1, it's even chance to defender retreat or attacker retreat. 1-to-2, there's still no chance. But at 1-to-3, there's a 1 chance that the attacker could be eliminated. 1 chance that the defender could retreat, otherwise attacker. When you start getting up here 2-to-1, the odds are in favor of the attacker. Way in favor of the attacker, there's still a chance. And not until you get to 4-to-1, 5-to-1, 6-to-1 that you can get a defender eliminated. And exchanges. Now, a special word about exchanges. When you do an exchange, the defender is eliminated. The defender is completely eliminated. The attacker must lose an equal amount of strength of the face value of the counter. So if there's a unit in a town, for example, that's doubled on combat, here's the train effects chart, town, defender doubled. That exchange that happens, you just take the face value of the defender if the exchange is resulted and the attacker loses an equal value or more. If the attacker can't make exact change, potentially you'd have to use a bigger unit. You might have to use multiple units, etc. Okay. Now, one thing to note about this odds, when you add up the attacker ratio to the defender, you always round down in the favor of the defender. You round the probability down. So if you have a 7 versus 6, that's a 1-to-1. Even though you have more than them, you don't go up to 2-to-1. Okay? You always round down if there's a fraction. Okay? Something else to note, you may voluntarily reduce the odds. You may have, for example, say a 2-to-1 attack. But the situation might be such that I really want this unit to retreat. I think I'd be better off if I retreated. You could say, I'm going to make the attack a 1-2 instead. Now, you could make it a 1-3, but there's a chance you could get an attacker eliminated. So rarely will you reduce odds. Now, the other portion of the combat result where you might want to reduce it is up here. If you have a 4-1, 5-1, 6-1 odds, now you have a chance to get this defender eliminated, but you have a chance to get exchange. Let's say you've got an 8 strength unit and it's attacking a 2 strength unit. And that's all you have there. Wow, you could kill him on a 1 or retreat him, but if you rolled a 6, if you rolled a 6 in exchange, that 2 strength unit would be eliminated and you'd have to lose your 8, the complete value of the 8. So sometimes up here on this side of the combat result table, you'll want to eliminate it to 3-1 to maximize your odds to get a retreat, but limit them. So he's like, well, why would you do that? You have no chance of killing that. Aha. Surrounding people. The main way in this Napoleonic system that you get the most kills is where people cannot retreat. You might have a line, you might hit this part of the line, hit that part of the line. Now this guy's surrounded by zones of controls. Bam, if you hit him and he retreats and he has nowhere to retreat that's not going from zone to zone, he dies. Now, you can retreat into an empty space. You can retreat into a space where there's a friendly unit and you have to displace him back. However, zones of control still eliminate you. So even if you're sort of surrounded, but there's a friendly guy here, but you're still surrounded by zones, you can't retreat to here, displacing that guy if there's zones on it. So if you're surrounded by zones and you get a retreat result against you, whether you're attacked and they cause you to retreat, or it's your turn and you're surrounded and you attack out and you retreat, you'll kill yourself, okay? So this relatively bloodless table of 3-1 is great odds, especially if you can surround somebody and force them to retreat, boom. But there's still a chance to fail at 3-1. Okay, so other quick things about the terrain effects. Forest in this version does not affect combat other than blocking line of sight of artillery. Artillery can bombard 2 away, and so if there's a forest in the way, you can't shoot through or over the forest. Slope hex side, those are along a hex side. If you're moving up the slope, costs us a movement point. And if all your units are attacking up the slope, the defender will be doubled. But if some are on the top and some are going up, then he's not doubled. Road can let you move half. There's no trail in this particular game, no marsh in this particular game. As I mentioned before, town will W. Attacking across river is impassable. Streams are passable, crossable, cost 2 additional movement points. It really slows you down. And if everyone's attacking across the stream, the defender is doubled. But if some guy is attacking from the other side of the stream and some across, the defender's not doubled. Okay. If you're attacking across a bridge, the defender would also be doubled because it's the equivalent effect of the stream or the river. Now you can't attack across the river. You could bombard across, but a bridge across a river, you can attack across that. Kind of a narrow front, but all right. So that is like 90% of the rules here of this system. Zones of control, movement, you have to stop. You do combat, it's odd base, you round in the favor of the defender, you got to attack everyone that you're next to. Now, that's one of the value of artillery. Like if you're next to a couple guys and you want to concentrate here, but there's this big guy here, okay, this guy maybe you attack here and you have an artillery shoot at that guy. As long as everyone gets attacked by somebody, you're okay. Now, artillery, when they shoot at range, when they're bombarding, if you roll bad, you're not affected. So if you get an exchange with artillery shooting at range, the artillery is not affected. If you're attacking at some small odds, like 1-3, and you roll that 6, the AE attack element is not affected. Shooting at range, the artillery is never affected. If they're adjacent, if the artillery is next to the guy and they're fighting, bam, they can be killed, hurt. All right, the last little bit in here, there are night turns in this system. And in a night turn, you may not fight anybody. You may not move next to somebody. If you start next to somebody, you cannot leave. So that changes the zone of control rules during the night. You cannot move next to an enemy. If you're there, you just have to stay, and there's no fighting at night. Now, this said, we've explained the rules how to play. We're going to cover a couple things here in the exclusive rules for this game. And one of those just things I said about night, there is an exception. Now, special rules here. First of all, there are fog turns. There's 2 fog turns in this. this particular scenario starts with 3 night turns and then some fog. Fog is a little bit different from the night in that, well, it's different. You have half movement allowance, the fog, and artillery may not attack at range. So at night you can't fight at all. And you can move, but not next to somebody, or if you start next to somebody, you can't move. Fog, you can move, but you can only move half. You could move next to somebody, but if you're an artillery, you cannot shoot at range. It's too foggy. Now, this game, Jena-Auerstadt, has an exception to the normal night rules. We explained the night rules. You can't move next to the enemy. You can't leave him if you're next to him. No fighting. In the Jena-Auerstadt rules, additional is you may not enter a forest hex, right? So you have to remember that the night rules for Jena-Auerstadt are slightly different from the regular rules, okay? Now, this is actually important. Now, if you start in a forest hex, you may stay there. You may not move to any new forest hex. Most of well, Jena-Auerstadt is a split map. We're going to talk about the setup here in a little bit, but the Prussians have the option of keeping all their forces together, and you ignore this battlefield here, but that's a real slugfest, not as fun. I highly recommend using the option where they split their forces, and Napoleon is faced by a holding action over here. He doesn't realize it. He thinks he's fighting the main army, but Davout, with, I believe it's 3rd Corps, maneuvers around, and he's thinking he's going to come around and hit the flank, but really the main army of the Prussians, and I think the Brunswick's dudes, are over here, and he has to sort of scramble to fight and not get overwhelmed and try to defeat them. He had with him a couple of other generals. One of the people that sort of went with him, Bernadotte and Davout, for some reason, didn't get along much. Bernadotte was supposed to come along, but he ended up heading back this way, sort of following Napoleon's orders, but really, sort of the real overriding thing would have, go to the sound of the guns. He should have come and supported Davout. He did not. So Bernadotte wasted the whole time, never got into the battle. Okay, so back over here, the French start here, and they sort of start along here. They start with 1 unit here. So the first 3 turns are night. They have 1 unit here. That means they can't enter here. They have units here. They can't go into these horses. So when I did my playthrough, I made a boo-boo. I think I had some guys entering here. I did not realize that strange forest night turn was an exception to the normal night rules. So you're a little more clogged up here the first 3 turns. No penetrating through here or here. There was one guy that starts there, he can stay. All right. So that's the how to play, the rules, the standard rules for Napoleon at War Quad, the exceptions for the Jena-Auerstadt. Now, I mentioned the setup. So there's the option A or option B for the Prussians. Option A is where they split up. And you'll need to pay attention to the reinforcement rules in the Jena-Auerstadt. Get them all figured out. Get them sorted. Get them on the track so you know who's coming who, depending on the option. And again, I highly recommend, at least the first time you play with option A, where the Prussian army splits themselves up. And most of Napoleon's forces will come on here. Some will come on with Davout way over here. There was a couple French guys that come this way. Now, I'm not going to talk about an important part. Well, I'm going to cover it in the after-action review, and that's the victory conditions. This game has slightly different victory conditions than many of these Napoleon at War games, and it's important that you understand them, and we'll cover that in after-action review, because things could have been a little different if I'd paid attention to the victory condition rules there. So this was the how to play portion. We're going to have the playthrough. That I don't cover every single turn, but I show the action every few turns. I think I do like the first 6 turns because most of it's night and fog, and then about every 2 to 3 turns I cover that. So I'm going to pause this here. We're going to create another one, and we'll do all sorts of splicing and editing and all that stuff. So this is Meandering Mike with our how to play setup issues for Jena-Auerstadt, part of the Napoleon at War Quad.